So, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Long Road Back, a podcast all about the hidden side of athlete recovery, to give elite athletes a voice, and ultimately to help people feel less alone during that long recovery process. Thank you again for all the support on all the previous episodes and the posts so far. I absolutely love hearing your stories of recovery and kind of the messages coming in. I genuinely love having these discussions with you about kind of this hidden side of recovery. It really does mean a lot to me, and to be honest, I'm learning new things every day as I'm doing this. So thank you so much to all of you. So today I'm really excited about the guest today. And this is someone who is a junior world championship medalist in judo, as a two-time medalist at the Commonwealth Games, and actually represented Team GB at the Paris Olympics. So I believe I actually would have watched her at the Paris Olympics, which I'm very excited to talk about. So Jemima, thank you so much for being here today.
No, thank you for having me on. It's been good.
No, it's amazing, honestly. And we were just chatting off air, about you and your experiences. And I think what would be really helpful, kind of listeners out there, is kind of give a brief kind of indication of your kind of journey into judo, and then at the Commonwealth Games and obviously the Olympic Games, which is fascinating. Because we were just talking, actually, just before I clicked the record button, you actually used to be a ballerina, which I hope you won't mind me sharing.
Yeah, so I basically had a dream when I was 5 years old that I wanted to go to the Olympics. I said to my mum, I want to go to the Olympics. She said, what sport? I said, I don't know. Can you find me one? So she took me to gymnastics, and I stayed there I was pretty good. I worked pretty hard. But one day they called me into the office when I was about 12, and they said that you're not elegant enough to be a gymnast. You don't point your toes. And basically all I wanted to do was backflips and stuff. So they called me into the office and they said, you're not elegant enough to be a gymnast. And my mum used to do judo. She was a black belt. And I basically swapped the leotard for a black belt and never looked back. And it got me all the way to the Paris Olympics a couple of years ago.
That's amazing. Honestly, I think I don't think I'd be very elegant at doing that kind of thing either. So I think that's understandable. I mean, the Paris Olympics is amazing. And I think just before we touch on that, you mentioned how you had the Commonwealth Games and you've just gone on this amazing career path with judo. And are there any kind of moments to stand out to you?
Yeah, so probably my first Commonwealth Games was Glasgow 2014, and I wasn't actually selected. So the normal way is you get selected, you have preparation, you go up to the holding camp, then you compete, and it's all quite smooth. Whereas I was actually on holiday in Centre Parks, and they called me 2 days before the event and said that there's been an injury in the team. And I was still a junior at the time, so I wasn't really expecting to be going yet. And they said there was an injury in the team and they'd like me to be the replacement. And so I was about to go down the rapids with my brothers, racing them, and basically got called to say that I need to get to Glasgow by tonight to register for the accreditation. And then 48 hours later, I won my first major medal at the Commonwealth Games. So that was probably one of the big highlights. And I was still a junior, so I hadn't really had a taste of like what it's like as a senior doing judo and where you can go and what it feels like. So when I got a taste of that quite early on, I was like, that kind of lit the fire to move on and progress and try and get all the way to the top.
I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it. That's amazing. I mean, there must have been what did your brother say in the moment? I mean, there must have been quite a turnaround from going down those. I mean, they're fun rapids. I have to admit, I have been on them before.
We had to cancel that. Well, I actually won the race because
quite right.
I was racing basically to get on the plane. But I was kind of like to my mom, "Are you sure?" Because they rang my mom because I wasn't answering and said, "Does she want to fight?" And my mom came running over like, "I've just had a call. Do you want to fight in the Commonwealth Games?" I was like, "What are you on about?"
Yeah.
And then 2 days later, I'd won my first medal and I had to borrow a judo kit because I didn't have any clothes or judo kit with me. And I think in a way it helped because I was so just like kind of so overwhelmed, but just so up for fighting that you just get on the mat and do it. You don't think about all the logistics because there was no time to think. So it was good fun.
It's amazing. There's so many stories like that in sport, aren't there? Where I can think of one. I know it's it's more niche in rugby, but the fourth choice fly half for New Zealand, Stephen Donaldson, is out fishing. The next thing you know is he gets called up and he's playing and winning a Rugby World Cup final. And I think it's amazing, isn't it, how stories like that happen? So That must be incredible. And then just kind of briefly before we touch on, your experience with injury, which, just kind of a precursor is incredible. And I think there's so many amazing themes, we're talking off air to unpack. How was the experience at Paris Olympics? Because I think I was just looking at some of your kind of fight highlights just before. I mean, it must have been an incredible experience.
Yeah, it was. It was an amazing experience and lead up, and it was very, very close in qualification between me and another British girl. So the whole qualification period was very, very intense. But then when you actually find out you're going, and for me, I love competing on the big stage and fighting with like a big arena, a big crowd. And obviously, the Olympics, you don't get much bigger than that. So I think it was definitely the highlight of my career walking out. And my mum and dad were watching, everyone is in the crowd, but my mum gets too nervous to actually watch. So whenever my name gets called, she watches me walk out and then walks out. So she wasn't watching the actual thing, but yeah, my whole family came to watch, and the whole experience and knowing that that's what I wanted since I was 5 years old to then actually being able to go and do it was amazing.
That's amazing, honestly. And I think that there's so much there to unpack, especially in relation to injuries, about that kind of motivation and finding that new sense of success in terms of, achieving that childhood dream. Because I'm sure there were plenty of steps along the road where, I imagine that dream might have felt somewhat far away. And it's definitely something we'll kind of come into. So it's kind of a starting point, because you genuinely do, as I've got some notes next to me, and I'm saying an absolutely amazing journey with injuries, particularly with knees, as far as I can see. So
I've got a love-hate relationship, me and my knees.
yeah, I mean, I imagine you know quite a lot about them, about the internal workings of the knees and stuff.
Well, I was actually messing about the physio last week, and I was asking about all the different tests, and I think I could do most of them. I was saying, this one's the PCL, this one's the ACL. So yeah, I think I'm nearly qualified myself.
Yeah, quite right. It's funny, isn't it? I mean, it comes back, doesn't it, to the idea that you know your body, like you know your body far better than anyone else does, and like especially. I mean, I'm not a remotely a physio or anything, but in regards to my own foot injury, I can label all the little bits and that's this and that's that. So as a starting point, I think the kind of question I'd ask you is quite an open question, but what was your first experience with injury? And I understand it's quite a broad one, but I'd love to kind of hear when you had that first taste of kind of that almost physical setback.
Yeah, so my first injury, I probably had more prior, but I never really acknowledged them. Like those are just like knocks and bumps, I guess. It was 2012. The start of 2012, I tore my MCL in my right knee, grade 2. And I remember hurting it and thinking, now that didn't feel quite right. And I said to the physio, they said, did you feel a pop? And I said, yes. And now feeling a pop is never a good thing, but I never really knew what it meant. I just said, yeah, it felt like it popped. And immediately he was like, oh, we'll best send you for a scan. And that was the first kind of taste of injuries. And if something's popped, that means something's gone or on the way to go in. And looking back now, it was a grade 2 MCL, which for judo return to play, I think it was 4 to 6 months, about. And that sounds a really, really long time, and that's not great. But that's actually, for what I've had after that, that's not actually that bad. So it was weird at the time. I genuinely thought it was the end of the world. Like, I remember crying in the hostel car park with my mum, like, what am I going to do? I've got a grade 2 MCL. This is the end of the world. And now, if you gave me that, I'd probably be like, yeah, I can take that.
You always bite your hand off just to have that kind of that timeline. And I mean, I'm really kind of almost interesting that you brought that up. And I think in this context, it actually is really worth kind of diving straight into that. So you mentioned that you've had worse injuries than that. Looking through your notes, you generally have been through the mill with your knees, and obviously mentioned your elbow as well. Could you kind of share your experience with, the kind of setbacks and injuries that you've had through your career, and then we can kind of work back from there?
Yeah, so I've had 3 ACL reconstructions. And again, for judo, I mean, every sport has different timelines, but for judo, the timeline is usually about 12 months. So that is 3 years out just with the ACLs. Then I've done both of my medial ligaments in my knee twice each, I think. One of them was reconstructed. I've torn the meniscus in both of them a couple of times. And most recently, I've been managing a large Baker's cyst in the back of my knee. It's giving me a bit of problems at the minute because it's very load intolerant, if that's the word. So it doesn't like doing things or being loaded. And obviously, as an athlete, you need to be on your feet and training and doing things. So we're just trying to manage the tolerance and try and raise it without causing too much problems. So yeah, my knees have never been very happy with me. And then I've also torn the ligaments in my elbow and had that reconstructed as well. Yeah.
I mean, that's utterly remarkable. And I think that, and we will come on to this, but the fact that you are, still working and working towards another goal now within the sport of judo is absolutely testament to your resilience. And I'm sure we will absolutely come on to what resilience means and discipline means. I'm sure they've probably taken a variety of different forms during your recovery process. So kind of just moving on from the NCL to that first kind of ACL reconstruction moment.
Yeah.
How did you manage that rehab? And because you mentioned how upset you were following the first MCL, because judo ultimately is an individual sport.
Yeah.
As far as I'm aware, team judo matches would be quite incredible to watch.
They do have team matches, but you are still individual, and then they add up the scores.
Oh, okay, well, yeah.
But in general, you're always on the mat on your own.
Yeah. So how did you find that first experience of rehab, and kind of what were the thoughts going through your head in the moment?
Yeah, so my first ACL, is that the one?
Yes, yeah.
So I think still I was a bit naive to it. Like I'd heard the word ACL like throughout my career. Like you hear people, oh my God, they've done their ACL. And I didn't really understand it. I mean, I had a quick Google, I remember when I did my MCL, and I read about an ACL and I was like, oh, well, I haven't done that. That's good. I'll just leave that one. And then when I found out I did do it, I remember the surgeon I saw is Andy Williams. He does a lot of the footballers. He's like a top knee surgeon in London. And he actually advised me. He said, you need your ACL reconstructed, but I want to wait a couple of weeks. And in my head, a couple of weeks, I was like, I'm not going to wait. Like, that's just going to add more time on the end. But actually, looking back, that probably would have been the best thing. So I said, can you just do it as soon as possible? So he said, I'll do it tomorrow. Because he was able to fit me in. But I think I should have waited a couple of weeks because I didn't have full range of movement. It was really swollen. I didn't really understand what the rehab process would entail. I just thought I just got to wait and then I'll get back. So I ended up coming out with an even more swollen knee from surgery. Didn't really know what the rehab program or plan was. And I think I probably needed a couple of weeks mentally just to get my head around it rather than jumping straight in. So I think that probably delayed me coming out just because I wasn't going in with the best knee or mindset ready for it.
Was it almost the case where you just wanted to get on with the process because you knew how long there was left?
Yeah. Like I literally was like, well, if we're going to wait 3 weeks, that's 3 more weeks added on the end. Whereas it doesn't always work like that. But in my head, I'd been told 9 to 12 months. So I'd already looked at the judo calendar. I thought, well, 9 to 12 months, that's where I'm coming back. And that's that. And there was no if, buts, maybes about it. But now, having had the injuries and the experience I've had, just because you wait a few weeks, it's not like you're going to gain it back or rush, but that doesn't mean that you're going to be added time on. It's very like as you go, how you feel. Yeah.
It's almost like learning to slow down, and that it goes back to that old fable of the tortoise and the hare, doesn't it? And is that the idea that because because prehab they talk about, don't they? It's a very important part of the rehab process, and something, to be honest, I think I'm still learning more about in terms of just how valuable that actually is. Those small measures you can take, whether it's mentally, and you're quite rightly saying that mentally or physically, to go, okay, now I'm ready for this, rather than it being this almost like tripping over your own feet. Got to get it done. Got to get it done. It's like, right, this is your body's going to go through a big change here. How can we, prepare ourselves mentally and physically. And I think that's really interesting. And is that something, do you think, that you maybe like adopted later on with, I mean, almost the catalogue of ACL reconstruction?
Yeah, so I think definitely the third ACL was definitely not easy mentally, but so I don't think I explained. So when with my third ACL, I was in a competition in Budapest, and I was fighting, and I got my knee caught up in a bad situation, and I knew it was in trouble. So on the way down, I put my hand out to try and save my knee, which didn't work. So I ended up tearing my ACL, but that's when I did the elbow because I would try to offload it and put it onto my arm. So I ended up tearing all the ligaments in my arm as well. So I then needed to have my elbow fixed as a priority, as they said that needed looking at more quickly, which forced me to wait for my knee. So I did the injury July. I had elbow surgery August and ACL surgery September. And I didn't really panic too much. Obviously, it was never ideal. I had two major injuries at the same time. But I knew with my knee that it was actually going to feel a lot better going into the surgery. And afterwards, I actually flew through it because I had full range and I knew what to expect. So, although mentally I was done because I couldn't even use crutches, I had to use like a bent arm crutch because of my elbow. I wasn't panicked about having to wait because I knew that was probably better in the long run.
That shows incredible kind of growth in your mindset, I have to admit.
I don't think it was good at the time. I was probably a nightmare to deal with, like the physios and stuff. But I knew that, well, I trusted the physios, the doctors, and they were telling me what I needed to do. And by the time you get to your third ACL, you just take the weeks and days off as you go and find any small positive thing because it's not ideal. Yeah.
It sounds like you had more trust in your knee for the third time, even though it had gone for the third time. You almost trusted your body to recover more than almost the first time.
I think by the third ACL, by all the injuries I've had, I think you learn what's normal and good for you. And I know and can trust, like sometimes my knee crunches a bit just because it does. And I'm pretty good at working out whether it's a bad crunch or a good crunch. I mean, it's not ideal. You don't want your knee to be making noises, but I'm pretty good at learning what to push through and what not to. The physios might say different. They say that I push it too hard, but it is my body, and I've had this many injuries. I've done the surgeries, I've done the work, and I trust. If I've committed to it and I believe I'm okay, then I think that's okay. Like everyone else can tell around you, but I'm the one that has to do it. I'm doing the rehab. I've done the work. I'm the one that gets back on the mat. So, you need a bit of belief in yourself.
No, exactly, and thank you so much for sharing that, because I think that one of the hardest things can be an injury, and I from personal experience and also from speaking to people out there, that feeling of almost being listened to, and I think that feeling that that your body more than anyone else does. So generally speaking, if you feel like something is wrong, it probably is worth looking at. Now that doesn't mean that any little bumps and bruises, and this all better than I do. I mean, I've seen some of your videos. You're a tough cookie, to say the least. It's like terrifying, some of the things that happen on the mat. But it's understanding that you understand when there's that line, isn't there?
I do think there is a line, and you want the professional guidance, but it is my body. I'm 30 years old. I've been through all this. I do think there needs to be a bit of trust and give sometimes. It's not going against what physio says, but and my physio is really good at the minute. She always lays out the risks of what would or could happen either way of the decisions I make. But I've learned a lot and felt a lot better the last couple of years, taking ownership and trust in myself. And if it messes up, then yeah, that's on me. But at least it's my decision, and I'll feel better rather than sitting back and thinking, letting other people make a decision and you just have to go with the results of that. I've felt a lot better the last couple of years owning it myself. Yeah.
And that control is so important, isn't it? And I think, and then you mentioned, and just want to quickly before we move on, just touch on something you said earlier about you had this almost transition in your mindset, this idea that I just want to focus on every little small win that I could and every little positive thing I could and take things day by day, rather than thinking, as you mentioned the first one, that, you know, I've got to get back and like I can picture, and I genuinely don't mean this disrespectfully, because I've done this when I've been injured from rugby, to go, okay, I'm out for 6 weeks, I can play against Durham away, or I'm back in 9 months.
That's the first thing you do. It's
It
like,
is, yeah.
right, the calculator out this many days, do this is what I'll enter, and then you end up even more devastated when you don't reach that. Yeah,
it's almost like because like, and this is something I'm learning, that when we set our expectations all the way up here, but the reality is that injury does this. So it's like I'd almost just love to hear kind of if you can expand on how you found that process of focusing on the small things, and then how that helps you reach your goal at the end.
I think when you've had so many injuries and quite big ones, I think you just have to sometimes get through each day. And I had a really good physio actually before the Paris cycle, and I was dealing with quite a few injuries then. And he would say, we had this rule where I could text him and say, I'm having a bed day today. And it was no questions asked. And it would just be, I'm not coming in, I'm not doing my rehab, I'm just having a day in bed. And I never took the mick with it, but I think having a team around you that is good and like professional and know how hard it is and how tough it is. And you'd be in rehab for an ACL and people would be in and out having had another surgery and back competing, and you're still 6 months to go. It definitely gets, it's not easy, but I think like even if I started doing a few vlogs actually, just documenting it for myself, because 1 week you put your shoes on, then you're able to tie your laces properly and bend down, and then you can take a few steps. Like it sounds silly, but that is actually how you have to break it down to get through it.
No, I think you're spot on. I don't think it sounds silly at all. I think it's something that the idea that and it's so hard to explain to people who haven't necessarily gone through this, that it really is, okay, what is one thing I can do today that will benefit the injury and not make it worse? And when I say not make it worse, I don't mean to try things, because sometimes, you know, as well as I do, it can sometimes be 1 step forward, 2 steps back, recuperate, move forward. But it's this idea that we're not making it drastically worse, or you're not pushing the limits too badly. And I think it sounds strange to put people maybe outside of injury circles, but this idea you can't cut corners. And it's like you genuinely can't cut corners. And we'll come on to in a second, but this idea, this like reshaping perspective and reshaping, you know, the way we see things. That, and the big lesson I've learned from injury is that you can't cut steps. You really can't. You genuinely have to take things 1 step at a time. And the world does feel, and we've kind of briefly chatting off air about this, but like the world does feel like it's moving at 100 miles an hour sometimes nowadays with social media and these things. And I just think what you mentioned there about, you know, small steps is so valuable, and I think so valuable to so many people, that, you know, it's that we don't necessarily have to have it all figured out. And actually, I was going to move on, but I just wanted to touch on something quickly. You mentioned about that bed day. I can't describe how healthy I think that is. I genuinely, I mean, how did you find that experience, that knowing that it was okay to say that?
I think it actually made it easier to go in because I knew I didn't have to. It wasn't like I was being forced into coming in to do rehab. It made me go in because I'm choosing to, because I want to get better, rather than, oh, I've got to be in at 9 a.m. to do heel raises again.
Yeah.
And also just knowing that the physio actually gets it, and he was on board with, he works for British Gymnastics now, but knowing he's on board with it and gets how hard it is, because sometimes I think you spoke about it in previous podcasts, like you get all the, oh no, how's your knee, this, that, the first 6-7 weeks, and then you've got no cast on, you've got no surgery, like plasters, you've got no brace on, so everyone forgets that you're actually deep in the injury. So I think knowing that he was on board with me being able to just call it a day sometimes was definitely helpful. Yeah.
And it's that sense of being seen, isn't it?
Yeah, like you don't want to be in a leg brace, but at the same time, at least people are aware you're injured and you're not doing this and that, rather than well, one of my pet hates is when you're injured and people come up to you straight away and say, "How's your knee?" And it's like, what about how am I?
Mm.
It's just become a knee, and it's all right they're asking once, but if you get that question 10 times a day from 10 different people, you just end up becoming a knee rather than a person. And yeah, that's what really annoys me.
I think you're spot on, and it's especially when injuries go on for a long time. And I really would love to kind of shift the focus and really have a look at your experience about returning from injury, because I think so much of the dialogue can be about how did it feel when you got injured again, how did it feel when you had to go through that again. I'd actually love to hear more about how you felt returning again, and how that kind of sense of, because you mentioned the drive about the Olympics, and I'd love to hear from you almost like how it felt, not just about being injured again and that repeat ACL, as you rightly mentioned, about the language and things that come with that. How did it feel in that returning process, particularly when you got closer? Did you feel like you were trusting your body again? And were there any moments where you felt like you might walk away?
There was definitely one moment that I thought, I'm not sure I can do this anymore. It was when I did the Budapest, when I hurt my arm and knee at the same time. And the coach said, well, my coach, Jamie, he carried me out of the arena because I couldn't walk. And the physio came up to me and said, "What have you hurt? Is it your knee or your elbow?" And I was like, "I think it's both." And I was like, yeah, I don't think I'm going to be doing judo for a very, very long time here, because I knew something had gone in my knee because it went back to that familiar pop feeling. I was
Mm.
like, well, my knee's done. I don't think my elbow's feeling very good. That was also during Tokyo qualification for the Olympics, so I kind of knew there and then I wasn't going to be going to Tokyo. Well, I didn't even have the results, but I knew by the way it felt that was going to be out of the picture. And so that was the first time I'd ever thought, like, do you really want to keep doing this? Like, what is the point of just the relentless rehab and surgeries, but for what? So then, yeah, that was the first time I'd ever thought in my head about not doing judo. But then it also coincided with lockdown.
Wow.
Uh,
Yes.
so that was difficult in a way, but actually, I think that was the best thing that could have happened for me.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah,
I was actually, sorry to interrupt you, but it's funny because my initial reaction was, oh God. But then during lockdown, but then the other side of me was thinking, well, hang on. In a weird way, this idea, and you mentioned about how earlier about how you felt like people were progressing, but you were still stuck on this injury journey. The world
yeah,
did kind of stop, didn't it? And
yeah.
and
Like,
weirdly, I
it,
imagine that might actually have helped.
well, it was a forced break for everyone. Like, I don't think I'd ever taken a break, even
Mm.
when I was advised to. I'd just be like, no, I'll carry on. Like, I'm not
Mm.
taking a break. And then I went home to be with my family during lockdown. Because I live in Kent. No, they live in Kent. I'm based in Warsaw. Um, and I couldn't go to the gym really. I couldn't get on the mat. And I think actually my body really, really appreciated
Mm.
a bit of a less sort of period. And mentally, I knew, although I still needed to get back, there wasn't competitions to get back for. It was difficult because obviously I had to do physio like virtually, and
Mm.
you can't really check someone's knee that well through a screen. So that part was difficult, but I also think that was the best thing that could have helped for me, yeah, was the fourth break basically.
No, I think that's it's a funny one, isn't it? And I was actually mentioning it earlier, as we mentioned off air. It is absolutely roasting in the UK right now. I said I can feel myself sweating in my windows, so I apologise for any background noise. But we were kind of saying that, and I was mentioning actually on my story earlier this idea that it can actually be quite hard when the sun's out, and then when there's stuff going on when you're injured. And it's this idea that, on the one hand, people go, oh, you should be able to go outside and enjoy being outside and enjoy the sun. And when you can, and like, of course that is true. I'm not remotely doubting that. However, it's also hard. Well, hang on, I can't, like in your case, I can't do judo, or like, I can't play rugby, or can't go out running. But then now I'm also seeing so many other people go out running and
Yeah,
exercising. And it's that really weird balance between, I understand it, but then it's also hard seeing time go by. And I just kind of touching on that, what does a 2-year recovery look like? And I mean, I completely understand that's such a broad question, but almost like what did it look like for you in maybe ways that might maybe slightly differ from, as you mentioned earlier, that first MCL injury you had, and you said the idea that 6 months you bite your hand off for that rather than 2 years.
Yeah, I think it was a huge amount of time. And then, so I went through the start of the injury, literally walking off the mat. And I remember thinking in my head, I'm not sure I'll ever walk back on a mat at this point. And then the the doctor was basically like, the injuries are consistent with being in a car crash because your knee is done, and my elbow was black at this point, and they didn't know if I'd broken it or the ligaments, but yeah, it wasn't doing very well. So actually, to start with, you don't even really think about judo. You're in a lot of pain and you can't function. So the first couple of months is actually just about trying to feel normal again. Like, I remember being in the kitchen, turning around with a plate of food, and my knee buckled, um, and my food fell all over the floor. And I was like, well, I can't even function in day to day life, let alone judo. So I think the first the first little bit is actually trying to get back to some level of functioning. And then it's about building back slowly into different elements of sport. Yeah.
No, for sure. I mean, that sense that of regaining normality is so important, isn't it? And I think
Yeah. And you don't obviously realize what you've got until it's gone. Like, obviously, that saying of you don't appreciate just being in the kitchen until you can't.
No, yes,
Yeah.
you're completely spot on. And I think that sense of changing perspective and almost redefining success is really fascinating. And like, kind of just before we kind of come onto that, because I think that's a really important kind of themes to look at as well. You mentioned how you kind of tore your ACL after the World Champs and that experience. How did you kind of find that transition alongside the kind of, as you said, that extended period of recovery? How did you find that transition from, you just mentioned doing judo at the absolute highest level? I mean, finishing fifth, if I'm not mistaken, which I think is an incredible achievement. How did you find that transition from almost the peak of your powers, let's say, to then suddenly that sudden shift to, wow, I can't even, feel like I can work in the kitchen?
I think I don't know whether it's a good thought process to have or not, but a lot of the time I am kind of on walking on tiptoes or walking on eggshells, is that the saying? I never get too settled or comfortable when things go well. I don't know if that's a good way to be, but I'm very suspicious sometimes when judo or training or my body feels good, because I'm like, right, don't enjoy this for too long because you don't know what's around the corner. But I also think in general that's sport. Like, you may hit a criteria for selection, but I'll never be like, well, I'm going, because sport is unpredictable. Life's very unpredictable. Injuries are like, I never settle too good in the good. But also it means that the bad, like that, there's a way out of the bad as well. The bad's never that bad for too long.
Well, I think you're spot on, and I think that as you took the words out of my mouth, the idea that from the outside it might be like, oh, why is that almost like a cup half empty kind of mindset? But I don't think it is that. I think it's this idea that it's about being present. This idea that I'm gonna be in the present of the good. I'm not going to think too far ahead. But in that same breath, as you rightly say, when things then go bad and you're in the depths of that 2-year recovery, you have this amazing resilience in your mindset to go, you're not trying to fix everything. You're not trying to, and from what I can hear here, you're not trying to say, on month 2 of the 2-year recovery, this idea that, I'm fine, I'll go back to judo tomorrow. But it's this idea that you're being present in the moment, and that you're like, yes, the bad's happening, but as much as I can, the more I can, allow myself to be present, feel like yourself, as you rightly say,
Yeah,
kind of more
I think
move towards
definitely.
that goal.
Because I've had such a big injury history, I do think it makes you appreciate the good days. That time I came fifth in the world, it was my first world championship, and I had a great day. Like, I was beating world medalists, Olympic medalists. No one was really expecting anything from me, and I think the work I had to do to even get there, and knowing I was having a good day. Like even in my head, I was like, you need to bank this day as a good day because these are the days that you might need later on. So I know it's probably a bit of a negative thought process, but I always I think I appreciate things a bit more because of how hard things have been.
No, I think you're spot on. I genuinely, it's one of those things, as you rightly mentioned before, that if you haven't been through an injury process, let's say, that might sound very negative. But if you have been through an injury process, the language and tone and what you're saying resonates so strongly with, I'm resonating deeply to what you're saying,
Yeah.
let alone to what so many other people out there listening to will also think. And I think it applies differently to different people's situations. But that idea that, allow yourself to celebrate the good, because you rightly say there might be a time when you need that. And I think that's so important. And I think this will be quite an important section here. And you talk about this changing perspective. And we had a quick chat off air about this, and I will let you share as much or little as you're happy to with this. You mentioned you had a kind of tragedy in the family during your kind of career, and it kind of coincided with certain injury with your journey with injury. How did that kind of shape your sense of perspective? Because I think, as you mentioned off air, this was actually a massive kind of cornerstone of that. And I think that's definitely something that a lot of people will kind of resonate with in their own way.
Yeah, so my older sister, Jenny, she was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer in, I think, September 2021. And I went with her to the doctors, and like she had some tests and stuff done. And they basically called us in once they'd done it all and said that she's got a year to live. And she died exactly a year later, September 2022. And I remember just from that moment thinking, like, as in me, I can never really complain about anything. Sometimes I think it's worked against me, but watching her go through the process of it, and then she eventually passed away a year later, it makes you feel like you can't really complain about a bad knee. It's like, it's a bad knee, it's not a bad life. Like, nothing is as bad as what I've had to watch her go through. And so, yes, maybe I won't go to the Olympics. Maybe my knee's too bad to do this. But it just makes you appreciate that, like, sport is an amazing thing, but it's not life or death, really, on the whole.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for sharing that. Genuinely, I think what I'm taking from that is more than anything this idea of perspective. And I think that the fact that injuries give such a massive perspective, the fact that you had something happen that even gave perspective on that,
Yeah.
it's almost this extra level. And I think that what's so important, and it's interesting you mentioned this idea that it sometimes works against you. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I can imagine this almost idea that it's this weird balance, isn't it, between you're completely allowed to feel frustrated. You are more than entitled because it's your knee, it's your identity, it's your routine that's changing, it's your pain. But in that same breath, the knowledge that how can I not let this consume me because I know there's other things out there or there's things like that. And I just think that perspective shift is fascinating.
Yeah, I've definitely struggled, I think, more so after she died at being able to take a rest or. So, in one hand, I go on the holidays, I completely enjoy myself, life's too short, get another round of shots in. Like that, on the one hand, that's my life. And then on the other hand, I'm like, how can I rest? How can I say I'm tired or I'm in pain when she went through what she went through? And so sometimes I think I overdo it or don't speak up or say when I'm in pain because watching what she went through, what gives me the right to say that I'm hurting because it's not as bad as what she went through and she didn't complain. So yeah, I think it's very up and down. One week I'll be life's too short. I'm gonna have a rest day today. I'm going on holiday randomly. And then on the other hand, I'll push it way too hard and do way more than I should be doing and not look after myself. But it's only because I've seen what really bad looks like and I know I'm not that. So yeah, I think I still haven't quite got the balance of that yet.
But I think that's natural. I think what I really, I mean, I'm listening to this now. I think you're incredibly brave even talking about it. Like genuinely, I think that to coincide with your journeys with injuries it must have been brutal. And you said that yourself it was so hard. And I think this idea that you haven't necessarily got it all figured out yet is normal. I think the more you like, I think the more that we in these situations go, okay, it's okay, I haven't got it all figured out, but I know that there's some days I'll take this from it, some days I'll take this from it. I don't think that's a negative. I really don't. I think there's so many powerful messages in that, and I think that sense of perspective is truly fascinating, and it quite rightly links to, and as you rightly say, it's not the same, but in terms of thematically, there's similar themes. This idea that injuries really do reshape what is important. This idea that, as you rightly say, have another round of shots in.
Yeah.
Or whatever analogy we use, this idea that being present as much as you can, because I understand there's different circumstances. Sometimes we can, sometimes you can't, but as much as we can, just being in that moment and celebrate the good. And I think that's such a important part, especially when, as you rightly say, injuries, we're aiming for up here and we're down here, and it's a long odd road and it's going to do that. So in those moments, celebrate the good. So thank you so much for sharing that. Honestly, I think it's very meaningful to me hearing it. I'm very kind of blown away hearing it, and I hope the listeners will also deeply resonate with that. So thank you very much for that.
Okay.
Just moving moving on briefly to the end here. And there's one more thing particularly I actually wanted to ask you about, and I'm glad I left it to the end. And it's this idea of redefining success. And kind of through your career, you've gone through an incredible amounts of ups and downs. And as you mentioned, going from the world champs to then suddenly being injured, and amongst other things, it's quite a broad question. But it's this idea that what does success look like to you now versus when you were 18? And then if there has been a change, why has there been a change?
So I think when I was younger, it was gold or nothing, and don't even talk to me if I've not won, and I've not won in 10 seconds and with the biggest score possible. I think I was very, very focused on winning, and I think partly you read quotes and stuff like, "Oh, winners never quit" and stuff, or if you're not first, you're last. And I think you see that and you're like, yeah, I'm gonna win everything. I'm gonna be the best in the world, and I'll never fail at anything. But then once you go through different experiences, then it becomes sort of, well, for me, winning and the back to the original question, it's I think there's a difference between the sort of giving up and giving it all you've got. And if I know I've given it all I've got, and my journey's been very, very up and down compared to someone that hasn't, they might have more success, but it's very individual, I think now. Yeah.
I think it's amazing, and there's that idea that, and what I really took from that, the idea that we almost can't control what other people do. We can't control that. All we can do is kind of give our all. And I think, and that just sounds like an unbelievably healthy perspective, because you're right. And I think just quickly touching on that, and we mentioned social media a bit beforehand, just the fact that there's so many quotes out there. You're right. And I remember reading those quotes on Instagram when the icon was a camera and it was all photos rather than videos and stuff like that. And kind of the accessibility of that content and all the stuff around the manosphere. I think there's a lot of themes similar with that, I have to admit, in terms of, pushing harder, doing more. So I think to hear someone like you with the credentials you have and the journey you've gone on say that, it's not necessarily always about doing harder and pushing more. It's actually about doing as much as you can. And sometimes that it's not.
Definitely.
And it's not a negative mindset, is it?
No, I used to actually, the last couple of years, I've really gotten used to it, but I used to try and do the most training, do this, be the last in the room and stuff, but I don't think that's actually that helpful. Maybe for other people it is, but my training load and the injuries I've had means that I can't do that, and so I might be the last into training and the first out, but I'm very mentally strong in my head, and I know I've done the work that I need to do. And other people can look at me, judge me, say you've not done this, you don't do much. But, well, then I'm like, have you had 3 ACL reconstructions? No, you haven't. So don't, I think I'm just very good at just staying in my own lane now, basically. And I'm not going to do the most training, but I'm doing the most and the best amount for me.
I think that is incredibly healthy. And I think it's an amazing note to end on. I think that I'm kind of smiling thinking about it, because this idea that, it's about you. It's about and what training that you need to do. And you're right, people do judge. That it's a fact, people do. And that's one of the reasons in conversations like this, in my opinion, and yours as well, is so important, so that people out there know that, if you have a busted up ACL, or in my situation, a foot injury, like I'm not going to return to rugby, but let's say for argument's sake, I did return to rugby, this idea that, I'm going to monitor my running between trainings, or I'm monitoring my load. Well, why? Well, because it's important for me, and I'm the one with the injury, not you. So look, Jemima, I'm going to bring it to an end there. Thank you so much for coming on. I think generally your insights in terms of that kind of first experience with injury and then kind of move into this idea of redefining success is amazing, and I think it's actually kind of one of the more new perspectives kind of had on here, and I think it's truly fascinating. So thank you so much. I wish you all the best with your injuries moving forward. I hope your knees will stay as healthy as possible, touching wood.
Thanks.
And I wish you all the best moving forward. Thank you so much, Jemima.
Well, thank you for having me on. Thank you.